Okay, good morning, everyone. We're just going to let people enter the Zoom room here for a second. Happy Friday. Thanks for spending time with us. And Dani, whenever you want to get started, go for it.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Dani Chammas. I am both a psychiatrist and a palliative medicine physician, and I have an outpatient symptom management clinic at UCSF. And I was lucky to be trained by some pretty amazing people, one of whom is the gorgeous inside and out Claritza Rios, who I'm looking at right now. Claritza, intro yourself.
Good morning. Dani was and will always be my favorite fellow ever, but don't tell anybody. Good morning, everyone. My name is Claritza Rios, and I am a physician. Currently, I'm the head of palliative care for a large organization that provides chronic care management for folks who are underserved and marginalized across the US. So super excited to be here.
Thank you both. Okay, I will go to the next slide here and I'll introduce myself. So after Claritza and Dani go through just some of the topics that we're going to talk about on the theme of, just holiday stress in general, but as relates to, serious illness, we go to you to answer your questions or comments or anything you're thinking about. And you can do that in two ways. So you can click the raise hand button and we'll unmute you and you can talk to Claritza and Dani and ask your question. Or if you prefer not to do that, you can just click on the Q&A and type your question in there. And then I will read it out loud for you for Dani and Claritza to address. So again, two ways: raise your hand, speak out loud, or you can type it in and I will read it for you. Thanks again for being here.
Hello.
All right. Over to you, Dani.
Awesome. I think Clarice and I thought it was important to just acknowledge up front before we get going the fact that, we all come from different cultures, different traditions, different holidays. And if our personal anecdotes or reflections end up being a bit centered on the holidays that we happen to celebrate, please know that it's really not our intent to exclude anybody, that we are actually hoping, the underlying themes around the human experience will resonate with everybody. Claritza, I don't know if you have more to add or if that basically sums this one up.
That's exactly it. Just big picture themes, I think, is what we really want to make sure everybody walks away with.
Yeah. And Sonia, the next slide. Real talk. All right. This session is about managing the holidays with serious illness, but let's just all acknowledge together for a moment that holidays, just as a human being without a serious illness, can be complicated, right? I remember when I was a kid, holidays were just uncomplicated, magical joy, which not everybody is lucky enough to experience as a kid. Valentine's Day was about heart-shaped candies and Christmas was about winning the family charades. And as I grew up, I came to learn, like many of us do, that it's more of a mixed bag. And I distinctly remember, Claritza, my first year as a psychiatry resident, working with a lot of people who had a lot of emotional pain in their life. And I sort of foolishly thought that the holidays would be this quiet, chill time of year in my clinic. But it turns out that I learned that the holidays are actually some of the absolute busiest work weeks in psychiatry, right? We get more messages from our patients, not less. Our anxious patients often feel more anxious. Our depressed patients often feel more depressed. The dysfunctional family dynamics often become more dysfunctional. Essentially, the emotional pain that was present in people's lives, not always, but quite often felt worse. And I've come to conceptualize the holidays a bit more like a magnifying glass, right? It's a time of the year when, depending on what's going on in our lives, what's going on in ourselves, we might feel the joys more intensely, but we might also feel the pains and the losses and the wishes and the stresses more intensely. Claritza, I don't know if that analogy resonates with you or
100%. And I didn't mention this, but I am an emergency medicine doctor, an internist, and a palliative care doctor. And so throughout the spectrum of my life in the hospital, one of the things that I can echo Dani's point, the physical manifestations of psychosocial emotional stress show up in the ER often in the holidays. Absolutely. I think one of the things you mentioned that kind of stuck with me is, there's magic from childhood, and for many of us, it's complicated, right? You experience maybe trauma from childhood when you're getting back together with family members. Many of us, go back to the roles of that family structure, and that can regress us a little bit. And so it's taking away control. And so it's complicated, as our slide so nicely says.
It is complicated. I know, I mean, even a non this time of the year holiday, but I know, when our relationship is in a good place, our anniversary feels ridiculously joyful, right? But if it's in a painful place, if there's something that we're longing for, not getting in the connection, our anniversary might actually be the day of the year where we feel that pain more intensely than baseline. So yeah, random example, but complicated. Maybe Sonia, we can move on to the next one.
I was gonna say, I like that example a lot.
Yeah.
So holidays in the setting of serious illness. I think that when we're talking about this magnifying glass example, I think that when we're dealing with a serious illness, when our loved one has a serious illness, when we've lost somebody, there's just more fodder to get magnified, right? Setting aside all of the really very real logistical stressors of the holidays, there's also just all the emotional and existential relational pieces of the serious illness journey that can get magnified and intensified and concentrated. And there's really not one uniform experience that we're all going to have, right? There's so many different things that everybody listening right now might be experiencing. And Claritza, if you're game, I thought maybe you and I could do a little brainstorming out loud about some of the potential stuff that can come up or that we've seen come up. But please, 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 if you're listening, brainstorm with us, right? Type it into the chat, type some of the stuff that's come up for you, and we'll sort of do this together. I guess I'll get the ball rolling. Maybe this is going to be your last holiday with a loved one, and there's kind of a joy, right? A gratitude around that, but there's also a deep pain that can come with that, right? And if this was a milestone holiday, if you were just really trying to make it to this holiday, there might be a lot of pressure that comes with it too, right? A need to make it super special. I have more, we can go back and forth or
Yeah. One of the things that I think about at holidays, and certainly from my culture, I'm Latinx, and food is a really big thing during the holidays. And when we care for someone with a chronic illness, one of the things that comes up often is, as the family members are bringing food, there is a sense of, gosh, that was my favorite. And I, as the sick person, whether you're the sick person or taking care of an ill person, you are feeling the, oh man, this is an I can't, or this is not a treat. And so a lot of feelings can come up for you. And then as the bringer or the bearer of the amazing food, there's a sense of rejection. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah. And I would say even globalizing from just your culture, I think in general, like if we can't celebrate the holiday the way that we used to be able to, we're going to feel that loss magnified, right? We're going to be so much more aware of the life that we had before.
Absolutely. Another thing that really comes up in that, and I love that you said that the life we had before, is this idea of like people coming into the space, especially if you're a caregiver. One of the things that'll come up is this like everybody comes in with observations. Oh, why is the house not decorated? Why are you giving her that food?
Claritza, have you met my in-laws? No, just I hope they don't listen today. I shouldn't have said that.
It's funny. I know from doing this work for a minute that there's all these wonderful, well-meaning people who feel carte blanche to just go to town on criticism. Who's cleaning the house? What does a bathroom look like that? And that can obviously cause distress to them as to like, I don't understand and I don't have that situational awareness. And boy, if I was a caregiver and somebody was criticizing all this effort and love that I bring into the work, it
Mhm.
would be a real bummer.
Especially if
So
they're popping in, right, for just a moment in what has felt like a marathon. I so resonate with that.
absolutely.
And then there's also, like, we can speak to the feelings that come on the other side of things. Like maybe this is actually your first holiday without a loved one. Maybe you're grieving, right? And so that grief, that loneliness, that yearning, all those memories might be getting amplified.
Yeah.
I feel like we could do this forever.
Yeah.
So many
One
things.
of the chats or comments was anxiety around traveling.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially in the time of COVID, right? If you're bringing yourself and all the bugs that are on you when you're traveling and you have an ill family member, absolutely. And that etiquette and do we test, do we not test? Just being stressed from traveling. I
Yeah.
mean, that alone, it's really, go ahead, Dani, you were going to say.
Oh no, I was gonna say, I think what the traveling speaks to for me is that we are creatures of routine, right? And we get used to our routine. We have our ways to do things. We have, be it false or, pretend, we have a semblance of control over how our day-to-day goes. And so the holidays flip that upside down. And so I think embedded with traveling is just this general idea that we relinquish some control over the holidays. And for anyone like me who is on the anxious spectrum, relinquishing control is kind of destabilizing. And that's not easy. I mean, the other one, Claritza, I don't know, like maybe some people are just exhausted. I don't know if you remember when my second kiddo was in the ICU for 3 months, but
Yeah.
3 months included the holiday season. And I remember, like it was yesterday, just feeling so unthinkably exhausted at the time, trying to stay on top of her care. And I was truly a mother split, right? On the one hand, I had this baby fighting for her life. I couldn't imagine leaving her. I couldn't imagine celebrating without her. Not that she had any idea that it was a holiday. And at the same time, I had this older kid at home who was just perpetually waiting for me to get home. And she so deeply deserved to celebrate with mommy and have this, uncomplicated, magical childhood memory. And I just couldn't do it all. I couldn't be it all. I couldn't be what I wanted to be. And there were just so many. It wasn't just one feeling. There were so many feelings wrapped in that: exhaustion, pressure, guilt, loneliness. Oh my gosh, like the deep loneliness that I felt every time somebody's very well-meaning, beautiful Christmas card of their happy, intact family came in. I digress, but my point being that there's just a lot that can come up.
Yeah.
I had a couple more comments I just wanted to read out.
Please.
Yeah, Sally said feeling left out when people can't participate in festivities. And then I'm just going to speak from my own experience recently is, Dani, you mentioned, this is kind of the last holiday, and knowing that it's the last holiday and wanting to make it extra special because it is the last holiday, like wanting to infuse it with the love, the memories, and make it perfect. And then how do you feel when it's not that way?
Yeah.
100%. And this idea of like, it's the last one, so I need to be present. Oh yeah, but I have this to-do list to make it special and I'm running myself ragged. And just when you put those two things together and you check in with yourself and you're like, I gotta be present. And that defeats the whole purpose. And we'll talk about what we need to do for that shortly. But just even just thinking, okay, I see it. I am aware that this has happened, and I think is a win or the beginning of a win.
Totally. And Claritza, I think that leads us beautifully into the next slide, right? That $1 million question, like what do we do with this stuff? How do we cope with this stuff? And I honestly, I sometimes think that I sound like a broken record on these Mettle chats because I haven't managed to get through any one of them without bringing up self-compassion. You guys are going to start kicking me out. But honestly, if there was one wish that I had for people, it would just be to be kind with ourselves, right? To allow ourselves the grace to feel what we feel, to remember to take care of our basic needs, and if we're feeling a little bit risque, maybe even doing something kind for ourselves in the midst of the storm. I know, Claritza, I beautifully brought up this idea to me recently of conceptualizing our personal boundaries as like protecting them as an act of self-love. And I'd love it to hear more about.
Yeah, we think of especially as caregivers, the importance of like empathizing with folks and being compassionate to others. And so that's great. You're part of that circle of people that will be celebrating or will be in this space. And so it's just as important to have boundaries so that you can exercise self-compassion. It is not selfish to do so, right? It's self-care is not selfish. And I know it sounds silly and a little bit kind of that consumerism we hear when people are trying to sell you, you know, Botox or an exercise bike. But at the end of the day, you know, filling your own cup will then just help you take care of others. And that means understanding and being clear about what is okay and what is not okay to do, to say, and to prepare, even if you have the script on how you set those boundaries, especially if you're like somebody like me who has a tough time saying it, but then is very reactive when they're crossed. You can't really have very many expectations if you don't set them. It's a good thing because then you can model it for the person who's ill. If you're a caregiver, you can model it for your caregiver if you're the person with an illness, and then you can model it for all these people dropping in as well.
Yeah. And I don't know if I should say this out loud in a place where it will be recorded, but I'll say it anyway. I often, since we're talking about boundaries, a pro tip, I often encourage my patients to use me if it makes it easier to set boundaries. Like, oh, you know, I was talking to my doctor about this holiday season, and they really felt it was important that whatever it is that's your boundary, you know, that I keep it small, that I ask people to test before coming over, that I pace myself and only commit to this many things or whatever. But I think it's easier sometimes to set the boundary if it feels like it's coming from your doctor for whatever that's worth. So feel free to use us.
Yeah, for sure. I always tell my patients and my husband, just use me. I'm the excuse. I love it.
And I think, Sonia, with the next slide, what comes hand in hand with this idea of, you know, self-compassion and receiving things as they come is mindfulness, right? A non-judgmental stance to the things that we do receive. And some of you listening have possibly heard me give my bus analogy before. So I kind of apologize because you're about to hear it again, but I also kind of don't apologize because it's a tool that I personally could never be reminded of enough. Clarice, I don't know if you've heard this whole spiel yet, but you can buckle up for the
I'm excited. Let's
for
go.
the ride. All right. So it's the passengers on the bus metaphor. I think it originally came from Stephen Hayes. He was the founder of acceptance and commitment therapy. It's been a really helpful, powerful one for me in my life. And for anyone unfamiliar or wanting a refresher, the basic idea is that you imagine your life is like a bus. And today we're going to call it the holiday bus. And you are the driver of this holiday bus. And the road ahead represents all of the situations that we encounter from the outside world, right? So pandemics, illness, holiday plans, Uncle Teddy coming to dinner, you know, any number of things. While the passengers on the bus represent all the internal experiences that are happening within us, right? Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. And we can hear the passengers back there as we're driving. And sometimes they're mumbling really softly, but sometimes they are screaming, right? And when they start to get too loud, too intense, our job is not, I repeat, not to start fighting with them and trying to kick them off the bus, because they'll just get louder, they'll just get more intense. But our job is also not to let their really loud, obnoxious, powerful voice take over and dictate where or how we drive the bus, right? At the end of the day, our passengers, aka our feelings, our thoughts, they're going to ebb and flow in their volume and intensity. And our job is simply to accept whoever happens to be on our bus at any given time, while still maintaining control of the wheel. Right. And I think about the bus all the time. Just this week, I was doing holiday decorating with my kids, Claritza, and it was just this really, really lovely moment when, as often happens in lovely moments, the thought popped into my head that this is probably going to be our last holiday in our home because our landlords are coming back. And I got this huge wave of anxiety and panic. You know, where were we going to go? How are the kids going to tolerate the change, et cetera, et cetera. And it felt really unpleasant to me. Right. my instinct was to do anything to stop that feeling. I didn't want it. And so I took a deep breath and I pictured the bus, the holiday bus. And I said to that really uncomfortable feeling in my chest, like, okay, hi, anxiety. Looks like you're on the bus right now. Feel free to take a seat, right? You're not the most pleasant passenger, but I'm still the driver of the bus. And right now I'm choosing to decorate with my kids. I guess you're on the decorating crew, right? And in this way, I was able to sort of tolerate its presence without fighting it or being drowned by it, right? I just accepted, for better or for worse, more so worse in this circumstance, that it was riding my bus. So that's it. That's the analogy. And I'll be honest, right? Like, some of our holiday buses are going to be more pleasant rides than others. But all we can do is just keep holding the wheel, keep driving. So, Claritza, I don't know if that resonates.
It resonates, and it also, you know, and again, we share so much of ourselves in our work, and I tend to have moments like that for whatever comes up, and I tend to be very reactive, right? Something, I get triggered easily, probably my past trauma. And when I think about the bus, and we had this bus idea has been floating for a minute. One of the things that I find difficult being a reactive person, especially when I'm being triggered by, you know, I'm regressing, or I am brought back to the place where trauma gets bubbled up because it's where it happened. I tend to just let what's happening in the bus kind of externalize. And in every aspect of my life, I think about the pause. And one of the things that you said so beautifully, Dani, is like you observed, accepted, but also you took a second to allow that to happen. And that is where I find, especially with folks that I work with, but certainly personally, that pausing for that checking without expectation of what's going to happen, but just allowing yourself the space and time to just give yourself those extra milliseconds to just be, as hard as it is for me, has been very helpful in not starting what I call a cascade. So a thought cascade, a cascade of exchange of negative energy amongst those people around me. So I, in terms of tools, the bus, and just allowing pause.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just count. Sometimes I just self-soothe. Touch is really important for me. So sometimes I'll just or do this, and that can be helpful because I need a reminder.
Yeah.
But something to think about for sure.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Claritza, because I think you live in my head as somebody who's like infallible, you know, like a little bit perfect. Maybe it's like, you know, because I was a trainee with you, but it's just a good reminder that, gosh, we're all working on it. We're all figuring it out, you know, like none of us has the secret sauce. Which also leads into, I think if I remember right, the next slide, which was about connection, right? I think sometimes when we're suffering, we can be really triggered by the perceived lack of suffering in the lives of others, right? Our situation can feel so lonely. And since you self-disclosed, Claritza, because you're one of my close friends, I will tell you this, and I'll pretend that nobody is listening to us for a moment. This Thanksgiving a couple of weeks ago, I had some big feelings that got triggered for me. I felt deeply alone in them, despite the fact that I was surrounded by people. And for lack of knowing how else to process them, I stepped aside for a portion of the day and I wrote a poem, because that's, you know, something that I do. But in this unexpected move, I spontaneously, anonymously posted this thing on a forum. And I got so many comments, way more comments than anything I've ever non-anonymously posted, of people who resonated, people saying, oh my gosh, I felt this way before. Oh my goodness, I feel this way right now. And these were all strangers. And I, of course, would never wish suffering on others. But I have to be honest with you, there was something so soothing for me about the connection. And it was such a huge reminder for me about how authentic connection is just deeply protective of the psyche. right? And so if any of us feel moments of isolation or sadness this holiday season, I hope we can find a way to remind ourselves that we're actually part of a pretty massive community. Right? We know through our work that many of the people smiling in those holiday cards are also feeling really alone too. Clarice, I don't know, do your boys have that book, The Invisible String, that children's book?
No, but I want to get it.
I will send it to you, but it's this idea that we are connected by these invisible strings, and I love the image because it just makes me remember that we can be tapped into connectedness even when we're in isolation, even when we're alone.
I love that. I want to get that for the littles. I think one of the things that when I think about connection, I think about shared themes, right? And so it's a shared feeling. That string analogy is so beautiful. Depending on your audience, you can share something like gratitude, right? And that's you're juxtaposing that next to the suffering that we're all in, and so that can be tough. But sometimes sharing in very vulnerably, like, I'm really sad. I'm feeling lonely. And it doesn't necessarily need to be with your partner, your caregiver, the person you're giving care to. It can be anonymous. It can be, with a caregiver group. It can be with a particular illness group, and it can be with your neighbor. There are opportunities everywhere. I think the point of vulnerability and opening up, it's where I think it's a little hard. It's certainly hard for me, because I do like to project that persona that you described before. And thank you for that, by the way. But and full disclosure, right? When you're trying to be strong and a rock for everybody, it's much harder to be really vulnerable and open.
Yeah. And I think part of what you're getting at too is, like, not to make a mountain climbing analogy, but like, know your belay partner, right? Like, there are some people in our lives who just are authentically able to see us and meet us in the way that we need. We all know who those friends are. And there are some people who, not for ill intention, just aren't really. And so think for a minute, like, who can be my belay partner this holiday season? Who's the person I want to just schedule one check-in, because I know whatever I bring, they're going to make me feel, seen or known or validated. Yeah,
For sure.
for sure.
And have a backup person too, just in case they're
Totally. And who might be a belay partner too, if I've got a lot
right.
of, right? You need me this holiday season, Claritza, you give me a call, girl. I'm here.
I love it. I might.
Oh my goodness. So then maybe we'll march through so we can get to questions. But I think the next slide, there's sort of two tips on this slide, and I think they both center around this idea of distilling meaning, right? I think all of us, but especially if there's a serious illness in the picture, kind of sucking from our bandwidth, we had the chance to really think about what is meaningful to us about the holidays, right? If we went bare bones, took all the externality away, what is at the core of what's important to us? And the answer to that question is going to be different for everybody. But sometimes when our capacity isn't huge, we might not have the luxury of doing it all. So it sort of becomes imperative to take a moment and reflect and distill on what's most essential. And then really hand in hand with that, try to find the greatness in those small things, right? I have two practices that I do with my patients all the time that I wanted to share. The first one, for lack of a better name, I'm going to call it the joy meaning compass. But when we're thinking about how we're going to choose to expend our energy, I like to have myself and other people run it through the joy meaning compass. Does it bring me joy? Okay. If not, does it bring me meaning? Okay. If not, is there a compelling reason that I'm going to do it? Right? 3 simple questions. And I did this with a patient just the other day, and we went through some of the items on her list. She was feeling quite overwhelmed by the holidays, and she was able to make the decision that she was going to put time and energy into making a pie from scratch with her kids, because it felt very meaningful to her to pass on that tradition, that memory. But she was actually going to give herself permission to, decline driving a couple hours to the big extended family holiday party this year because it just didn't pass her compass test for this year. So before I go on to the other tool, intention setting, Claritza, I wanted to check in with you. Does that resonate? Do you have other sort of ways that you think through how to help people focus their energies?
I love it so much. I think when you are just overwhelmed and the have tos and maybe meaning, it's a have to because of meaning, but it feels a little bit blurry. It's nice to just recenter yourself and reflect on, why are we getting together? What do these people mean to me, especially if it's interpersonal? And if it's a have to, can you find at the core why, you have ambivalent feelings, but you care about these folks, and dig into that a little bit more. Keeping on top of boundaries and keep it on top of staying true to the meaning, but sometimes just digging in a little bit can help just sort of
Yeah.
relax it a little bit.
And you're right. Like the meaning might be like, it brings me meaning to see so-and-so happy. So I'm going to do this thing that I kind of hate, but I'm tapped into why I'm doing it. Right. So that's going to help it irritate me a little bit less.
Yeah.
And I think sort of the related tool that I often do with my patients is setting an intention for the holidays, right? A very small, concrete, achievable goal. I had a patient recently who was going to do Thanksgiving at her sister's house, and she knew that it was not going to be fun, right? And as we worked on setting intentions for the event, she landed on, my intention is that I just want to avoid World War III. And it made me laugh so hard that this is what she picked, but she did. And she allowed herself to not impose any additional emotional or relationship tasks to be done, right? Just avoid World War III. And we even joked together that when somebody inevitably made, a frustrating or triggering comment that day, she could think of me and in her head say, well, it's not quite World War III, right? And then any moments of enjoyment at the meal would just be added bonus. And the practice really helped take the pressure off of her. And so I'm wondering, and I apologize in advance for doing this, but I'm wondering if we can all together collectively just take a moment right now and set one small intention for this holiday season. And maybe Claritza and I, we can share ours, but you guys keep it to yourself if that feels more comfortable, but feel free to write it into the chat. Sometimes there's a nice accountability that comes with having it being, spoken aloud. So, I think for me, I'll go first since I'm forcing everyone else to do it. I think for me, it's going to be to do my best to be present in the moment with my family, or at least find a few moments to be totally present. I have a lot of things in my mind right now pulling me away from the present, concerns about, housing and schooling and things like that. So if I can find pockets where I'm truly present, that's going to be a win for me this holiday.
I love that. I want, as a middle-aged woman with growing children, that means there's a lot of elders that are starting to decline, and it is difficult to, as a physician, see decline and not immediately think prognosis and planning and in that clinical sense. And so my hope is that I can just focus on the memories that we're creating and the joy that my children get out of spending time with these elders in our lives.
I love that. I so resonate with that. Yeah.
We had one share that I just want to read out loud too. Sarah said, my intention is just to hug my loved ones and tell them I love them.
What a beautiful, pure intention. Right. And I think you said the name was Sarah, but Sarah, if you just stripped everything away from the holiday, if you just accomplished that, then gosh, that's a beautiful thing. Right. So, which I think gets to the last slide that we had, which is just know yourself, right? We all know ourselves best. We know our coping. We know what works for us. So I think that the true task that this all boils down to is look at our feelings, voice, at least to ourselves, voice what it is that we authentically need, and find some way, small or big, to honor it. I don't know. Claritza, do you have a go-to question for yourself?
So for me in the holidays, the things that help me with coping is, and I know this can be tricky, but it's traditions that bring me joy. So that can be difficult if, somebody's no longer walking, or if somebody's having a tough time engaging in dance. But can we listen to music together? Special Puerto Rican Christmas music is really important. So we may not be able to dance or go on what we call parrandas, but can we listen to those songs and modify and still be grounding and feel centered by maintaining the core feeling of the tradition.
Yeah.
Same with cooking, same with like passing down stories and traditions through telling stories, right? And so that can be hard sometimes if somebody's had a stroke or this happened or that happened. What other ways can I find to be able to continue the tradition in a modified way, still staying true to that core? To me, that helps me. It also gives me control.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a good point, because in answering the question for myself, like when you say that, it makes sense, but that wouldn't have been what came to my mind first, right? Like for me, I know it's humor. Like humor is my number one coping. And we're about to go into Q&A, and this is probably a totally unnecessary story, but I'll tell it to you, Claritza, because I think it's going to amuse you. But I remember this one Valentine's Day in college where I was single. It's never fun in college to be single on Valentine's Day. And I was not looking forward to it. And I had this group of girlfriends who were in the same boat. And we just decided that we were going to have the best party. And we all got our wine and we put on a marathon of romantic comedies, but we stopped them at the moment in the movie where there's conflict. Like, because in every rom-com, there's that moment where like she thinks he was cheating, but she wasn't, or, am I just a bet, or whatever. There's the conflict scene that gets resolved later. And we stopped it there. And we moved on to the next one. And we had so much fun. And we were like, oh, sucks for you. And then we would watch the next one. It was like failed rom-com after failed rom-com. But it was one of my favorite Valentine's Day, which it should have been a sad one, or it shouldn't have been sad, but it like was slated up to be a not great one for me, but it hit on my favorite coping, right? It hit on humor, it hit on connection. And so know yourself, right? We've had a lifetime to inform what it is that helps us get through. So we have time for questions.
Yeah. Let me stop sharing here and then we can get to those. Okay, awesome. Yeah, we had a couple come in while you guys, let me end the show here. Oh.
Well, you stopped sharing. I see Claritza's beautiful face.
Hi, Dani. I see your beautiful face.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. Now I can see both your beautiful faces. Okay.
Sorry, we have too much love for each other.
There's a lot of love at Mettle.
Right?
So one of the questions came in while you guys were speaking was, what is the best way to communicate limitations? Which I think is like the perfect question for this discussion.
Yeah.
Wait, can I clarify like what limitations? Please. Unless you have a sense, like limitations on what you want to do. Or
Sarah, I'm going to go ahead and guess what you mean, but then please chime in if not. So for me, like limitations, like I don't want to go to this, or it is going to be too hard to get up those stairs, or I am just too tired to go to 5 parties in one night and need to cancel 4 of them. So yeah, activities, energy, limitations on what you want to do. I mean, I find myself talking to many people through the holidays who are like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to go to this party. I am exhausted. Like, how to best express that.
Yeah, I think for me, in thinking about, especially if you're the person who's having sort of limitations from an energy standpoint, I think it's really fair to start the conversation with like, I'm so happy that you thought of me and that you invited me to this. I feel loved, wanted. And Dani taught me this when she was a fellow. You always think like, oh, at a certain level in life, you just kind of know most things, in medicine, you realize that's not true. There's always like, you're a lifelong learner, right? Dani Chammas taught me this, rather than but, to say and she even wrote this whole thing on one of our forums. That was so beautifully written. And don't say but say and say, and I am having a tough time thinking that I can really enjoy this event the way you want me to enjoy it with you. So I can come for 30 minutes, or I can't come, or I'll call in, or I want you to send me pictures, or whatever it is. You know, you can negotiate that a little bit, but I think being really clear about, you know, this is thank you, and this is where I'm at today. If you're comfortable sharing all of it, fantastic. But if you just want to say, I'm just not in a place to do that right now, this is how I can show up for you, and this is how you can show up for me. I think it's really, really reasonable. Go ahead, Dani.
Yeah. And I will add, as we said before, use us if you need to, use your physicians if you need to. I'm a people pleaser. So setting limits is does not come naturally. So for me, I do sometimes like to have a little bit of a script up front, because otherwise I will lose myself into being so worried about the other person. And I have worked for a really long time at learning to not apologize for my limits. You know, I agree with you, Claritza, like acknowledging the other person, being grateful for the other person, but not apologizing for the fact that I can't do something. And I do find that I have to look at the spirit with which I'm setting the limit. Like if I feel really irritated or defensive, like why would they think to invite me to this, or this was so rude to them, then it's harder for me to communicate in a way that the other person can take in. So I really try to resettle myself into a spirit of, you know, authentic appreciation for the goodness in everyone, and then set it. And I think when I do that, it comes across in a more digestible way. But there's also a piece of knowing your audience, right? I have some friends who I can just say, listen, I'm not up to this.
Nope.
Done and done. They get it. They'll never think of it. And I have a few family members who, if I say no about something, then I can anticipate for the next 17 Christmases, I'm going to hear about the time that Dani didn't come to the thing because Dani didn't want to come to the thing. You can, yeah, I know we both. So you can adjust your strategy sometimes with those family members. Sometimes I'll call my mom and be like, hey, I need to set this limit with this one aunt, but if I do it directly with her, it's not going to work. And so don't be surprised when I CC you on an email today. And then I will send an email to like 50 family members, and it's directed at one, but it takes away the sting because I know that that's their sensitivity. And I'll be like, hi guys, you know, this is what's going on for us. This is where we're at. We love you all so much. We're going to be, if we say no to anything this holiday season, know that it's because of blah, 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 blah. Like, thanks. We have the best family. And some people don't need that, but for that one family member, I did need to take that strategy. So you might have to adjust your strategy a little bit.
Yeah. And I also think that you're not always going to get it right. Right. And that you need to remember that whole self-compassion thing, just like doing the best that I can, you know, with the resources that I have in front of me is a really good way of not kind of going down a rabbit hole of like, you know. I think that that's really important. But yeah, and I love the idea of don't apologize, because then it becomes this, yeah, and that's not healthy, not another thing on your to-do list of beating yourself up or feeling some kind of way. Is really important. That resonated with me a lot. I'm an apologizer.
Yeah. And I mean, ideally people can meet us where we're at and they're not frustrated with us, but we have to remember everyone else is coming with their own baggage too, right? We don't know what our limit may or may not trigger in somebody else, what it might bubble up, but we don't always have to assume responsibility for that, right? That's something that's going on within them. And so I do think Claritza's point earlier about thinking of our boundaries and our limits as a form of self-compassion can be helpful for me, where I try not to hurt the other person, but if something comes up for them, I have to remember, like, you know, I'm not totally responsible for them. Sarah, I don't know, you can chime in if you want, if you're out there. I don't know if that helps or if...
She said it was helpful. And then actually she brought up something else that I just wanted to bring up here in case you guys want to comment on it, because it's really interesting. So there's also the opposite problem of being left out because of perceived limitations. So I don't know if you guys have any commentary on that one, but I thought that was really interesting too. There's two sides of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what happens sometimes with serious illness, there are probably some people out there who are not cool, but I think so professional. But I think that most people are well-intentioned, right? They think, oh, let me invite them so that they feel included and they don't know that it's going to feel like a burden, or they think, let me not invite them so that it's not a burden, and they don't know that it feels bad. And so I think that most of the people, especially if they're of value in your life, are well-intentioned and they love you. And so just meet them where they're at. Like, I think it's okay to just let them know, right?
Yeah.
And come at them well-intentioned and just let them know, like, hey, I would love to, I would love to connect, or
100%.
a space or whatever it is where you're at, because a lot of people are guessing. They're guessing, they want to do right by you, but they don't know. And if you don't tell them, they're not going to know. And so give them grace for the fact that maybe they got it wrong.
100%. And I think if you want to preemptively strike, certainly if your treatment or your caregiver and the treatment for that person is evolving, it's really reasonable to be like, hey, everybody, as the holidays approach, just want to update you. I am walking. I am doing this. I am looking forward to celebrating with you all. This has been interesting. I think that gives, it's just really helpful. I'm thinking about Dani's point of like, that they don't have to guess what the right thing to do is. It's like, you're just saying like, I'm ready to party. It's wonderful.
I love this idea of a preemptive strike. I love
100%, 100%. And think about it, right? Like, you can text everybody everything all the time. But when there's a big change and you're ready to just be back into that space, let people know, for sure.
I'm also seeing in the chat that somebody shared the intention, maybe an intention to be completely simple of heart. Let everything be completely simple to allow ease.
Beautiful.
I like that.
Actually, Karen, same person who has that beautiful intention to be simple of heart, has her hand raised. Karen, I'm going to unmute you here. And you may have to, there you are. Hey, Karen.
Okay. I unmuted. Thank you so much for this topic. I'm just wanting to do a check-in. I just have such an aggressive treatment schedule for lung cancer. And I think because of COVID and then because of treatment, I have had all my family is out of state. So I have a brother whom I love deeply, haven't seen him in 3 years. And we were going to do a sibling reunion, and I literally was told I had to stop everything and have radiation on a tumor in my vertebrae. So I did, and that canceled our big family reunion in September. So we rescheduled to get together, and then my husband and I got COVID. And now here we are with Christmas approaching. And of course I'm invited. What I'm realizing is that between COVID and cancer, I really have changed. And I realize I am in a rhythm of daily life that my brother and sister and some friends and other family, they're simply unaware of what my life is like now. And I kind of went through in the early stages of my diagnosis and illness, kind of really being good about updating and the whole terrified, all the implications of lung cancer. But I don't do that so much anymore now that I've kind of figured it out. I say I've figured it out. So increasingly, I am not the family member they think I am. And I think the cancer has kind of receded, which is terrific. But I was so happy to hear the word blurry, because that's what's happened. Things have gotten blurry. And I also feel a little better equipped just to let things to be honest, and say, I'm just not up to the travel, and I love you, and we can Zoom or phone and all this, but just to take things down to a manageable baseline. And what's kind of painful, I no longer have the energy or the desire to really do a kind of blow by blow, this is how I'm dying. I just don't want to go there. I want it to unfold, I suppose, and still have the loving spirit of Christmas. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but I realize, wow, I'm kind of in this alone in a very real sense. And then I also know I have a bounty of support. I'm so, so lucky. So Dani and Claritza, thank you. I don't know if there's a question there, but I
Karen,
just feel validated.
what a beautiful comment though. And I think at the end you hit it, Claritza's and, right? I'm alone and they have a bounty of support, right? They're both true, but what a beautiful comment. And I will also, before I give you a reflection on it, I will say I'm grateful that there wasn't a question there, because when I started to hear your voice, Karen, you are one of the people that I hold in my mind is so full of wisdom. When I started to hear your voice, I thought, if she asked me a question, I'm going to turn it around on her and say, what do you think? Because I know you well enough, Karen, to know the well of wisdom that lives within you. But I think it's just such a beautiful point, and I am so grateful that you brought it up, right? That the experience of illness fundamentally changes us. And I think you once brought the image in a different talk about this idea that we sort of break a little bit and then we remake and we're a new person. And there are some people who are close enough to us on that journey that they see the evolution of who we are and who we have become. And there are some people, for not because of them, who are far away enough that they haven't seen that evolution. They don't realize that they're sort of tangoing with a new human a little bit. And I think it's such a good point to bring up at the holidays, at this time where we often check in. Now, what do you do with that? Right? How do you introduce people to the new you? And how do you honor the new you?
Thank you so much. You're both beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think another thing that Karen said that just felt really real for me is like, or the theme is sort of like, just, you're so self-aware and you're so you're evolving, and sort of just being in awe and appreciation for like what's happened to you and how and who you are now. I think that you're really honoring that, Karen, and that's beautiful. And I think I love you and I need space. I can't say it enough, Dani, and this has stayed with me for like the 7 years that we've known each other. It's been, we've known each other for so long. It's wonderful. It is a way of sort of updating and being really clear about boundaries, but also reflecting back on like, why is this a question? Who are these people to me? What do they mean to me? I love them. They're wonderful. And this is just not the place that I am anymore. And that's okay. And those two things can live together. One of the things that I want to just to make sure that y'all walk away with is that things are going to be next to each other and they're going to seem not consistent, right? Like sadness and happiness, those can live together, and they're juxtaposed with each other and mushed up, and it can be happy, sad, and you can be, you know, in a mix of emotions that kind of can be opposing, and that's okay.
Yeah,
totally okay.
Totally. We can laugh through tears and it's all in there. And Karen, I will appreciate one more thing. I probably want to appreciate everything you said, but I will appreciate the fact that you said, I don't want to give them the play-by-play, right? And that's okay. You're giving yourself the grace. They don't have to totally get everything that's happened, and we can self-titrate some of this stuff. So
yeah.
Just want to add a little note from Deb that's kind of related to Karen's point too. She just said it's hard when people are coming long distances to visit, and I only have I can only do an hour and a half visits with people because I get just completely wiped out, and then I feel bad having people come so far for so little.
And Deb, I know you, so I'm gonna I'm going to say, at least for myself, an hour and a half with you would be a total treat. But I think that if there was one piece in that whole comment that I would want you to focus your energies on, it's that feeling bad piece. Because honestly, people love you. People love the chance to get a moment with you, right? To get one more memory with you. And if you could have the self-love and the self-compassion to remove that, because I know you, Deb, and if it was any one of the rest of us making this comment, you would say, like, you would shower us in compassion. And like, of course, this is where you're at. Just be true to who you are, and people will be grateful for what they can have. And so that's the piece that I want to send my energies at in what you said.
And as someone who has traveled to care for to just check in, to say goodbye, I can't say enough that it's about just that moment. If for the others, Deb, I want you to give yourself a break. For anybody else who's thinking, you know, this may happen, give people a heads up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm exhausted, and so I can probably give you half an hour. If you can do 90 minutes, tell them you can give them half an hour. So then when you give them 45 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes, they're like, yeah.
Totally.
That expectation setting with big maybes, you know, is reasonable. And sometimes I tell my patients, set low expectations. And then if you do more, then great. But at least everybody's feelings are managed.
And I mentioned earlier this idea of not apologizing for our limitations, but I'll add to that I've learned in addition to not apologizing for my limitations, I will express gratitude for people seeing my limitations. Like, I'll say something like, I won't say, I'm so sorry I can't see you more, but I'll say something like, thank you so much for understanding all that's going on for me right now, right? Or thank you so much for making the trip, even though my bandwidth is low. Or thank you so much for being the type of friend who can meet me where I'm at right now. It's not an apology. It's just something I've replaced the apology right when I say sorry for. That's what I tend to do.
Yeah. I just want to say amen to that. I say that outside of illness too, just in my own life, of like, thank you for allowing me to just do what I need to do and accepting it without giving me any grief for it. Like, that is exactly the kind of friendship I need. Thank you so much. And feels good to say it, and I'm sure it feels good to receive it. And Deb, also just wanted to add, just put yourself in the other person's position. Like, if it were me, I'd be happy to come see you, you know, even if it is for a small amount of time. And I assume that you would feel the same for your loved ones. People want time with you in the same way that you want time with them. So anyway, even if it's a short time.
Even just like, I love you so much. I wish I had more time. Like, for me, I wish I had more energy. I wish I had more time, but I'm grateful for what we'll get.
Love that.
I think we're all through the questions and all through the hands. It was perfect timing, and that's kind of a gorgeous thing to end on. So
thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. However your holidays are, you know, hope you get some time to yourself, to honor yourself. Thank you so much, Dani and Claritza, for being here. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
love you both.
Your holiday buses.
Yes.
I'm gonna hop back on mine. So
yes, get on that holiday bus.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.